Ethan had never imagined he would stand before a palace that seemed to float among the clouds. The Celery capital, Niralith, was a city of shimmering towers connected by delicate bridges that glowed softly under the pale violet sky. He had been sent as a human diplomat, an explorer of worlds, tasked with establishing communication between Earth and the Solari, a species both feared and admired across the galaxy. Despite all his training, the moment Ethan passed through the palace gates, he felt a thrill of nervousness. The palace guards, tall and armored in silver suits that gleamed like liquid metal, watched him with sharp eyes. The Solari were known for their strict hierarchy and their suspicion of outsiders, especially humans. Yet Ethan walked with confidence, careful to show respect without bowing too deeply. He had learned that excessive deference could be misinterpreted as weakness. The grand hall opened before him, vast and luminous. The walls reflected light like polished crystal, and hovering platforms drifted silently above, carrying attendants and couriers. The Solari nobility moved with a graceful precision that seemed almost unnatural, their elongated limbs and shimmering robes giving them an air of royalty that made Ethan feel both small and important at the same time. At the far end of the hall, sitting on a throne that seemed carved from living light, was Queen Lyris. She was breathtaking even from a distance. Her skin shimmered faintly with a silver hue, and her eyes, large and deep, seemed to pierce through anyone who approached. Around her, advisors and guards stood in disciplined formation, their expressions unreadable. But what caught Ethan's attention immediately was a small figure next to her, a child not more than 7 cycles old, with bright eyes and curious features. The formal introduction began. Ethan stepped forward, bowing lightly, and spoke the greetings his superiors had rehearsed for him. The court was silent, listening to his every word. But then unexpectedly the child, Lyra, suddenly bolted from her mother's side. Ethan froze as the small figure ran toward him, her little feet making soft but rapid sounds on the polished floor. Before anyone could react, Lyra had slipped behind him, hiding at his back as if seeking safety. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the court. No human had ever been allowed this close to a Solari royal child. Ethan turned slowly, lowering his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly, his voice steady. "You're safe." Lyra peeked out from behind him, her large eyes wide with fear. She clutched the hem of his tunic, pressing herself against him. Ethan could feel the rapid beating of her small heart, the tense energy of a child sensing danger. The queen's expression remained calm, but her eyes flickered with a mixture of surprise and concern. She had seen her child react like this only once before, during a minor incident in the gardens. But to run straight to a human? That was unprecedented. "Lyra," Queen Lyris called gently, her voice smooth and melodic. "You must come back to me." The child shook her head, holding onto Ethan's tunic even tighter. Ethan crouched slightly so his eyes were at her level. "You're not in trouble," he said. "I won't let anything happen to you." The court watched in astonishment. The human, this outsider, was calming the royal child without a single gesture of force. Ethan realized that Lyra had sensed something they hadn't, some unease that only she could feel. A Solari attendant stepped forward, their voice sharp. "Your Majesty, should we remove the human?" Queen Lyris held up a hand. "No, let her decide." Her eyes met Ethan's briefly, as if assessing whether he could be trusted. Ethan simply nodded once, silently promising that he would keep Lyra safe. The child's fingers loosened slightly, and she took a hesitant step toward Ethan, peeking at the guards and courtiers around her. Ethan smiled gently. "There's nothing to fear here," he said, speaking in a tone that was both firm and soothing. "I will protect you." It was a delicate moment, one that could define his standing in this palace forever. If he failed, he would be dismissed or worse. But for now, he had the trust of the most important person in the room, the child. Queen Lyris leaned forward slightly. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm but firm, "why do you think a child would trust a human, someone who has never been part of our world?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "Because I believe children can see truth," he said. "They sense danger and safety in ways we adults often forget. Lyra ran to me because she feels that I can help her." The queen studied him, her deep eyes searching. Then almost imperceptibly she nodded. The court murmured in quiet surprise. Her acknowledgement meant a lot. The rigid rules of the palace had just been challenged by a human, and no one could ignore it. As Ethan spoke softly to Lyra, he noticed the child's attention flickering toward the palace windows. He followed her gaze and saw in the distance a flicker of movement, something dark and fleeting near the outer walls. He didn't panic, but he noted it mentally. Perhaps Lyra's instincts had been right. Perhaps the child had sensed something real. Do you see it? Ethan asked quietly, gesturing toward the shadow. Lyra nodded, clutching him tighter. Ethan realized then that this visit, meant to be diplomatic, might quickly become far more complicated. Yet he did not feel fear, only determination. The queen rose gracefully from her throne and approached. Her presence was commanding, yet there was a softness in her gaze as she looked at her child clinging to Ethan. "You may stay for now," she said, her tone carrying the weight of absolute authority. "But remember, Ethan, the palace is no ordinary place for humans. You must earn your trust, or you may not leave safely." Ethan inclined his head respectfully. "I understand, Your Majesty, and I promise. I mean no harm to your child or your court." Lyra peeked around Ethan's arm and smiled faintly, the first sign of trust. It was a small gesture, but in that palace, small gestures carried immense weight. The attendants began guiding Ethan and Lyra toward a side chamber, away from the main court, so the child could calm down. As they walked, Ethan kept his hand lightly on Lyra's back, not as a restraint but as reassurance. Once inside the chamber, he knelt to sit on the floor, motioning for Lyra to sit as well. "You can tell me your name," he said softly. "Lyra," she whispered, barely audible. "Lyra," Ethan repeated gently. "I'm Ethan, and I'll make sure nothing bad happens while you're near me." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded, the tension in her small frame slowly easing. Ethan noticed how intelligent and perceptive she was, even for her age. The child's instincts were sharp. She sensed danger but also courage, and she had chosen to trust him. Meanwhile, in the main hall, Queen Lyris observed from the throne. Her advisors were murmuring among themselves, concerned about this unprecedented situation. But the queen remained silent, allowing events to unfold. She was both cautious and curious. Curious about the human who could calm her child in a way no Solari attendant had ever done. Hours passed as Ethan and Lyra sat together, talking in simple words. He asked her about the palace gardens, the flying creatures she liked and the colors she enjoyed. Lyra responded cautiously at first, then gradually opened up. The court began to hear tales of the human's calm demeanor spreading through the palace. By the end of the cycle, Lyra had completely relaxed in Ethan's presence. She no longer hid behind him but sat beside him, occasionally taking his hand. Queen Lyris finally approached, observing the unusual bond forming. "You have a gift, Ethan," she said quietly, in a tone meant for Lyra and him alone. "You have earned her trust. That is no small thing." Ethan smiled modestly. "I only listened to her. That's all." The queen's eyes, deep and unreadable, studied him for a long moment. Then she turned and addressed the court. "This human is no ordinary visitor," she announced. "He has shown patience, courage, and understanding. Let him remain in the palace while our investigations continue." The courtiers were stunned. Some whispered about the audacity of allowing a human such access, while others began to consider that perhaps there was value in observing Ethan's actions. He had done what the Solari themselves had failed to do, earn the trust of the royal child. As night fell over Nirelith, the palace lights glimmered like stars. Ethan stood at the chamber balcony with Lyra, watching the sky. "Do you feel safe now?" he asked. Lyra nodded, her small hand in his. "Yes, you're strong. And nice." Ethan chuckled softly. "I'll always try to be both." And in that moment, standing in a foreign palace with an alien child holding on to him, Ethan realized something profound. Human courage and empathy could shine even in the most alien of worlds. Little did he know, this was only the beginning. The palace held secrets, shadows, and threats that even the queen had not anticipated. And Lyra's trust in him would soon be tested in ways no one could predict. For now, though, Ethan had earned a place in the palace, and in the heart of the Solari's future. The morning sun bathed the palace of Nirelith in pale violet light, casting long shadows across its shimmering halls. Ethan woke early, as he always did when in a foreign and unpredictable place. He had been allowed to stay within the palace at Queen Lyris's discretion, a gesture almost unheard of for a human. Yet as he walked toward the breakfast chamber, he felt the subtle tension in the air. Lyra, the queen's child, had not yet fully settled. When he entered the chamber, Lyra was sitting at a small table near the balcony, fidgeting with her food. She didn't eat much. Her bright eyes scanned the room continuously, darting toward every shadow, every movement. The other attendants and palace servants moved quietly, keeping a respectful distance. Ethan approached gently, kneeling beside her chair. "Good morning, Lyra," he said softly. "Did you sleep well?" Lyra shook her head. "I had dreams." "Scary dreams," she whispered. She lowered her voice further as if someone might overhear. Ethan nodded, understanding. "Dreams can be frightening," he said. "But dreams are only in our minds. They cannot hurt us here. I'll keep you safe." The child blinked, unsure if she could trust him fully yet. But she clung a little more to his hand. Suddenly a palace attendant approached cautiously. "Your Majesty," the servant said, addressing the queen from a distance. "We have investigated the outer corridors. There is something unusual." Queen Lyris's voice cut through the air, calm but commanding. "Bring the report to me." Ethan's curiosity piqued. "Unusual? What do you mean?" The attendant hesitated. "It seems someone, or something, has been moving near the palace walls at night. No one has seen clearly. The patrols report shadows that vanish as soon as they approach. The child may have sensed this." Lyra tightened her grip on Ethan's hand. "I saw it. Last night," she said, her voice trembling. "It was dark, moving." Ethan gave her a reassuring smile. "You were right to be afraid. It's okay to feel that way, and we will find out what it is." The queen entered the chamber then, her presence commanding immediate attention. She knelt slightly to meet Lyra's gaze. "Lyra, tell me what you saw." Lyra spoke slowly, pointing toward the outer walls. "It was like a shadow, moving fast. I didn't know what it was." Queen Lyris turned to Ethan. "You see, human, she has a gift. She senses danger before it arrives. Few Solari children can do this. And for her to seek you, perhaps she senses your courage as well." Ethan bowed slightly. "I will do everything I can to protect her, Your Majesty." "I promise." The queen's lips curved into a faint smile. "Very well. You will accompany the child today as she walks through the palace gardens. Observe her, understand her instincts. Learn why she trusts you." Lyra's face brightened slightly at the prospect of leaving the hall. She had always loved the gardens, with their floating flowers and glowing ponds. She stood and offered her small hand to Ethan. "Will you go with me?" she asked. "Of course," he replied. "I will not let anything harm you." As they stepped into the palace gardens, Ethan took note of every detail. The gardens were breathtaking. Flowers that hovered in midair, streams that sparkled with bioluminescent fish, and trees that swayed without wind. But Ethan's eyes were trained on Lyra. The child moved carefully, stopping to examine strange plants, her ears twitching as if listening for something invisible. "Do you hear it?" she asked suddenly, pointing toward a far corner of the garden. Ethan tilted his head. At first he heard nothing beyond the soft buzz of the garden. Then a faint rustle, almost like whispering, came from the shadows behind a row of tall silver trees. He knelt beside Lyra. "Stay close to me," he whispered. "Whatever it is, we will face it together." Lyra nodded, her small hand slipping into his. She stepped behind him instinctively, just as she had the day before. Ethan felt a strange warmth at that trust. In all his years of exploring unknown worlds, no creature, human or alien, had ever relied on him like this. Suddenly, a small figure emerged from the shadows. Ethan tensed, ready for defense. But it was only a young palace messenger holding a scroll. He nodded respectfully and handed it to Ethan, who carefully opened it. The scroll contained detailed observations of nightly shadows along the palace perimeter. Movements were detected, but no figure had been captured clearly. "This confirms your instincts," Ethan said to Lyra. "You are very perceptive. Not many can sense these things before others notice." Lyra's eyes widened. "Really?" she whispered. "You think so?" Ethan smiled. "Absolutely. You have a gift, Lyra, and today we will learn more about it." They walked further into the garden where the Queen's guards trained in combat. Ethan observed them with careful interest. He had noticed that the Solari were physically superior to humans in many ways, but they relied heavily on precision and ritual. In contrast, he relied on improvisation and observation. Perhaps he thought the combination of his instincts and Lyra's gift could create something powerful. A sudden noise startled them, a falling branch, or perhaps something more deliberate. Lyra froze and pressed herself against Ethan. He held her close, scanning the surroundings. "It's okay," he said softly. "Nothing will touch you while I am here." From that moment, Ethan realized how much trust the child had placed in him, and he understood that her instincts combined with his courage could make a remarkable team. Back in the palace hall, Queen Lyris discussed with her advisors. "The child's attachment to this human is extraordinary," she said. "We must observe carefully. He may provide a new form of protection for Lyra, one our own cannot offer alone." The advisors murmured uneasily. "Your Majesty, is it wise to rely on a human? They are fragile, unpredictable." The Queen's gaze was steady. "Ethan has qualities we have yet to measure. Do not underestimate him simply because he is human. Observe him closely, and you will understand." Meanwhile, Ethan continued to guide Lyra through the gardens, teaching her simple ways to notice unusual sounds, shadows, or movements. She listened intently, absorbing every word. The child's trust grew with each step, and she began to feel safe in ways she had never experienced in the palace before. As the day progressed, Ethan and Lyra returned to the palace chambers. He helped her settle down with quiet activities, drawing and storytelling. Lyra laughed softly at his attempts to imitate Solari gestures and sounds, and Ethan realized that humor and patience could also strengthen their bond. That evening, as the palace lights shimmered like stars, Ethan was called to meet Queen Lyris. She stood at the balcony looking out over the city. "You have done well today, Ethan," she said. "Lyra has never trusted anyone so quickly." "You are remarkable," Ethan bowed. "I only listened to her, Your Majesty, and I only followed what seemed right." The Queen's eyes were thoughtful. "In our world, courage is valued, yes, but understanding is rarer. You have both," she paused. "Tomorrow we will begin training exercises. Lyra's gift must be honed, and you will assist her. If danger approaches again, she must be ready." Ethan nodded. "I will do my best." Lyra appeared then, shyly taking Ethan's hand. "Will you be there tomorrow too?" she asked. "Always," he replied. "I will never leave you when there is danger." The Queen watched the small interaction quietly, a faint smile on her face. This human, an outsider, had already begun to change the palace, not with power or authority, but with trust, courage, and patience. Little did Ethan know the shadows that haunted the palace were growing bolder. The rogue noble, envious of the Queen's authority, had noticed the bond between Lyra and the human, and soon he would attempt to exploit it in ways no one could imagine. For now, though the palace rested under a violet sky, and a human and an alien child had formed a connection that could alter the course of their worlds, Ethan had earned her trust. Lyra had found safety, and the first seeds of an extraordinary partnership had been planted. The night was calm, but the air carried an unspoken tension, a promise that tomorrow would bring challenges beyond imagination. And Ethan, despite being human and outnumbered in this alien world, would have to rise to meet them. The palace of Nerilith was quiet in the early morning, yet an undercurrent of tension hummed through the halls. Ethan had spent the night thinking about the shadows Lyra had sensed. Something was stirring beyond the palace walls, and though he could not see it, his instincts told him that danger was closer than anyone realized. Queen Lyris had requested a private audience with him before breakfast. When he entered her chamber, she was standing near the balcony, her silver hair catching the faint morning light. Her eyes were sharp, observing every detail of his posture, every flicker of expression. "You have earned the trust of my daughter," she said, her voice calm, but layered with authority. "That is unusual. Tell me, Ethan, do you understand what that trust implies?" Ethan nodded respectfully. "It means that she believes I will protect her, Your Majesty. I take that responsibility seriously." The Queen studied him for a moment, then gestured toward a map projected in the air. The projection showed the palace and the surrounding territory. "There is a threat," she said. "A rogue noble seeks to destabilize my rule. He has eyes and agents in places we cannot fully monitor. My daughter sensed something, which led her to you. You must understand that the palace is not just a home, it is a fortress, and every corner may hide danger." Ethan examined the map carefully. He could see patrol routes, security nodes, and hidden chambers. "I will assist however I can, Your Majesty," he said. We can use strategy, observation, and timing to stay ahead of the threat. Lyris nodded. Good. Tomorrow you will accompany Lyra on another walk. Today you will study the palace defenses and learn the layout of potential danger points. If the rogue noble tries anything, we must be ready. Ethan spent the day exploring the palace, guided by careful instructions from the Queen's chief advisor. The palace was a marvel of alien engineering. Walls that could shift to create barriers, corridors that changed orientation, and platforms that moved silently between levels. He took notes, noting choke points, hidden passages, and vantage points from which to observe without being seen. Lyra appeared mid-morning, curious and slightly restless. Ethan knelt to greet her. "Do you want to explore the gardens again?" he asked. Her eyes sparkled. "Yes, but I want to show you something." She led him to a secluded area of the palace grounds where a small grove of silver-leafed trees swayed gently, though there was no breeze. "I like this place," she whispered. "It is quiet. Safe." Ethan looked around carefully, noting the subtle rustle of leaves that could indicate movement elsewhere. "It's beautiful," he said, "and it will be our lookout spot if we need to watch for shadows." Lyra nodded seriously, her hand brushing against his. "Do you think the shadow will come again?" Ethan considered the question. "If it does, we will be ready. You sensed it last time. That is your gift, and I will help you use it." The rest of the day was spent in careful observation. Ethan showed Lyra how to notice small differences in light, slight shifts in shadows, and sounds that seemed ordinary but could indicate movement. The child listened intently, absorbing each lesson with focus beyond her years. Meanwhile, in the main hall of the palace, the rogue noble was already plotting. His name was Tarion, and he had long envied the Queen's power. Lyra's trust in Ethan had caught his attention. A human protecting the royal child? It was an opportunity he could not ignore. He whispered instructions to his loyal followers, emphasizing caution and precision. If he could manipulate fear and distraction, he might succeed where brute force had failed. As the day turned to evening, Ethan and Lyra returned to her chamber. The child seemed calmer, but her eyes still flickered nervously toward the windows and shadows. Ethan knelt beside her bed, reading a simple story aloud to distract her from her worries. "You are very brave," he said softly. "Do you know that?" Lyra nodded. "I try to be. Brave enough to face anything," he said. "Even shadows." Her small fingers found his hand, squeezing it. Ethan felt a deep responsibility. This was no longer a simple visit or diplomatic mission. Protecting Lyra could become a matter of life and death, and the palace itself might be drawn into a conflict it was unprepared for. Night fell, and the palace corridors became shadows of silver and violet. Ethan patrolled quietly, checking every vantage point he had memorized. His human senses were not as sharp as the Solari in daylight, but he could notice patterns, listen for subtle noises, and sense disturbances that others overlooked. Suddenly, a faint movement caught his eye, a shadow slipping along the far wall. Ethan tensed, alert. Lyra's instincts had been right all along. He followed the movement silently, careful not to reveal himself. The figure disappeared into a hidden passage. Ethan made a mental note. Tarion's agents were already inside the palace. The next morning, Queen Lyra summoned Ethan and Lyra. "Today, you will accompany her on a longer journey through the palace grounds," she instructed. "The rogue noble's plans may unfold soon. You must be ready for any sign of danger." Ethan nodded, his mind racing with strategies. "We will be careful," he promised. Lyra clutched his hand as they moved through the palace gardens. She walked slightly behind him, but her eyes were alert, scanning the area for anything unusual. Ethan showed her subtle ways to detect movement, teaching her to trust her instincts while remaining calm. They reached the edge of the gardens, near a crystalline pond that shimmered with bioluminescent fish. Ethan gestured for Lyra to sit and watch the surroundings. "Notice how the water moves," he instructed. "Even small ripples can tell us something is near." Lyra nodded, concentrating. Suddenly, a faint sound came from the other side of the pond, a rustle almost imperceptible. Lyra froze and pointed. Ethan immediately crouched, scanning the area. He could see a shadow moving swiftly between the trees, but it was careful to remain hidden. "See that?" Ethan whispered. "That is why we must be aware." "You sensed it first. Your instincts are correct." Lyra nodded, gripping his hand tightly. "What do we do?" she asked, Stay calm, Ethan replied. We observe, we wait, and we respond only when necessary. The figure slipped out of sight and the immediate threat passed. Ethan exhaled slowly. That was Tarion's agent. He is testing the palace defenses. Lyra's eyes were wide. He wants to hurt me? No, Ethan said gently. He wants to scare you. But you are safe with me, and we are ready for him. The child seemed to relax slightly, her trust in Ethan unwavering. The palace itself seemed to hold its breath as though aware that these two, human and child, were preparing for something extraordinary. Later, Ethan reported his observations to Queen Lyris. She listened intently, her expression unreadable. Tarion's audacity is growing, she said. He underestimates the strength of trust and courage, and that is his weakness. Ethan nodded. He has plans, Your Majesty. But Lyra and I, we can anticipate them. I will stay alert. The Queen's eyes softened as she looked at Lyra, who stood beside Ethan. Your bond is unusual, human, she said. Perhaps this alliance of instinct and bravery will protect my child where all else might fail. For the first time, Ethan felt the weight of responsibility settle fully on his shoulders. He was not just a guest or diplomat. He was a protector, a shield for the future of an entire royal line, and he could not fail. That evening, as the palace lights shimmered across the gardens and corridors, Ethan and Lyra walked slowly back to her chambers. She leaned lightly against him, exhausted from a day of learning and observation. Will tomorrow be like today? She asked. Perhaps, Ethan replied, but we will be ready for whatever comes. You are brave, Lyra. Braver than most anyone in this palace. The child smiled faintly, a sign that her fear was slowly being replaced by confidence. Ethan knew that this was only the beginning. Tarion's schemes were already in motion, and the palace's tranquility was fragile. But with Lyra's instincts and his own courage, they could face whatever dangers approached. As night settled over Nirelith, the palace seemed peaceful. Yet shadows lurked just beyond the walls and intrigue stirred among the nobles. Ethan and Lyra, united by trust and purpose, had prepared themselves for the trials that would soon come. For now, they were ready. The night was unusually still in the palace of Nirelith. Even the usual hum of the floating garden seemed to fade beneath a quiet tension. Ethan could feel it in his bones. The shadows he and Lyra had observed were growing bolder. Somewhere beyond the walls, Tarion's agents were preparing. Lyra slept fitfully, her small frame twitching at imagined sounds. Ethan stayed near, keeping a watchful eye. He had prepared every precaution. The palace corridors had been mapped in his mind, secret passages noted, and vantage points memorized. Every movement would be calculated, every shadow observed. Suddenly, a faint rustling reached his ears. He froze. The rustle came from the balcony near Lyra's chamber. A figure tried to slip inside, moving with unnatural silence. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He grabbed a small defensive tool, a compact light disruptor used more to disorient than harm, and quietly moved toward the sound. The intruder paused, sensing that the child was not alone. Ethan's mind raced. He needed to protect Lyra without alarming her. Lyra, he whispered, shaking her gently. Wake up, something is happening. Stay behind me and don't move. Lyra's eyes opened wide with fear, but she trusted him completely, moving behind him without hesitation. The intruder, a tall figure cloaked in dark robes, slipped closer, aiming to reach the child. Ethan stepped forward and activated the disruptor, sending a blinding pulse of light. The figure recoiled with a hiss, caught off guard. Ethan grabbed Lyra and backed into a safer corner. You must stay quiet, he whispered. I will handle this. Lyra nodded silently, her small hands gripping his tunic. Ethan could feel the tension in her body, the same alertness that had guided her instincts earlier. Together they were a team, hers the awareness, his the protection. The intruder recovered quickly, moving toward another route to reach them. Ethan led Lyra through a secret passage he had discovered the previous day, winding through the palace in near silence. The corridors were labyrinthine, but Ethan's memory of the layout was precise. He could anticipate the movement of the intruder and find safe turns. As they reached a smaller hall, Ethan paused. Listen carefully, he whispered. We need to trick him. He scanned the area and noticed a maintenance hatch above, leading to an overhead platform. Using quick thinking, he helped Lyra climb onto a small ledge out of immediate reach. Then he activated a series of silent alarms he had mapped, creating illusions of movement in another corridor. The intruder, fooled by the false signals, went toward the decoy path. Ethan breathed a quiet sigh of relief. For now, the immediate danger had passed, but he knew Tarion would not give up easily. They continued through the palace, Ethan guiding Lyra to a secure observation chamber that overlooked the outer walls. From there, they could watch the courtyard and detect any further movement. Ethan instructed Lyra on what to watch for: the subtle ripple of shadows, the faint reflection of moonlight off hidden weapons, the movement of guards who were unaware of what to anticipate. Lyra observed intently, her small eyes scanning every detail. Ethan realized that her instincts were remarkable. Even he, trained in human tactics and strategy, could not detect half the nuances she noticed. Her senses were sharp, intuitive, and valuable beyond measure. Suddenly, a group of figures appeared near the palace gates, Tarion's agents. They moved quickly but carefully, trying to avoid the main patrols. Ethan whispered instructions to Lyra. "Watch their shadows. Tell me when they move left or right." The child nodded, pointing out subtle shifts in the shadows. Ethan made adjustments to their position, preparing to intercept if necessary. He contacted the palace security through a discreet comlink, alerting them to the threat without revealing their precise location. The next hour was tense. The intruders attempted several approaches, testing the palace's defenses and probing for weaknesses. Ethan and Lyra moved quietly, remaining hidden while observing. Every time the intruders made a misstep, Ethan adjusted, ensuring Lyra stayed safe. Finally, one agent slipped past a courtyard barrier, attempting a direct route to the observation chamber. Ethan's mind raced. He could not let the intruder reach Lyra. Using a combination of careful movement and human improvisation, he created a distraction, shining a reflective light to simulate movement in another corridor. The agent hesitated, giving Ethan the opening to intercept. He stepped out from the shadows, his presence sudden and imposing. The agent froze, realizing that this human, smaller and seemingly weaker, was blocking the path. Ethan's calm, unwavering stance unnerved the intruder. He used the light disruptor again, disorienting the agent long enough to guide Lyra safely along a hidden passage. As they moved, Ethan explained the plan to Lyra. "We must stay calm, trust each other, and anticipate their actions. That is how we stay safe." Lyra nodded, her small face determined. "I trust you, Ethan." Their next challenge came at the palace garden bridge. The rogue noble himself, Tarion, had appeared, flanked by two agents. His eyes were filled with ambition and cunning, but also surprise at Ethan's presence. He had expected fear, not courage. "You dare involve yourself, human?" Tarion demanded. "This child is out of your reach." Ethan didn't flinch. "You underestimate us," he replied calmly. "Lyra is not just a child, and I am not just a human." Tarion lunged, attempting to grab Lyra. Ethan acted quickly, blocking the attack and creating a barrier between her and the noble. Using swift, improvised maneuvers, he forced Tarion back toward the courtyard edge. Lyra's instincts guided Ethan, pointing out where the noble's movements were predictable, allowing Ethan to stay one step ahead. The courtyard erupted into chaos as palace guards arrived, responding to the subtle alarms Ethan had triggered earlier. Tarion's agents were intercepted, and the rogue noble realized his plan was failing. With a frustrated hiss, he retreated, disappearing into the shadows. Ethan finally allowed himself to breathe. Lyra clung to him, her small hands trembling but relieved. "We did it," she whispered. "Yes, we did," Ethan replied, gently holding her. "You are brave. I am proud of you." Queen Lyris arrived soon after, her expression a mixture of relief and admiration. She approached Ethan and Lyra, her eyes reflecting the pride she felt. "You have done more than any of my guards could," she said. "You protected my daughter, human, and you showed courage beyond expectation." Ethan bowed slightly. "I only did what I could, Your Majesty." Lyra's instincts guided us. The queen looked at her daughter, who was still clinging to Ethan. "This bond between you is extraordinary," she said softly. "Perhaps it is not just the child who learns from the human, but also the palace itself. Your actions have demonstrated a strength we did not anticipate," the court murmured in astonishment. A human, an outsider, had thwarted a planned attack on the royal family, a feat many Solari considered impossible. Whispers of respect and disbelief spread quickly. Ethan's reputation had grown overnight. Later, in the quiet of her chamber, Lyra rested her head against Ethan's shoulder. "Will he come back?" she asked, referring to Tarion. Ethan shook his head gently. "Perhaps, but we will be ready. You are not alone, Lyra. I will always protect you." The child smiled faintly, comforted by his presence. For the first time, she felt that even the shadows could not harm her while he was near. The palace itself seemed changed. Where there had been tension and fear, there was now a cautious optimism. The Queen's trust in Ethan had deepened, the courtiers' respect had grown, and Lyra had gained confidence in her abilities and instincts. But Ethan knew that the danger was not over. Tarion had retreated, but he would return with more cunning, more preparation, and more force. And when he did, Ethan would need to be ready, relying on both human ingenuity and the child's extraordinary senses. For now, though, the immediate threat had passed. Lyra slept peacefully, Ethan kept watch, and the palace seemed calm under the violet night sky. But every shadow, every whisper of movement, reminded Ethan that vigilance would always be necessary. In the quiet, he allowed himself a small thought. Humanity, even on a distant alien world, could shine through courage, empathy, and trust. That realization gave him confidence for the challenges still ahead. Tomorrow, the palace would rise again to face the unknown. And Ethan, the human protector, would be at the center of it, standing between danger and the child who had trusted him completely. The palace of Nirelith awoke to a tense dawn. Ethan had spent the night planning. Tarion's failed attempt to kidnap Lyra was only the beginning. He knew the rogue noble would strike again, more carefully, more violently. But this time, Ethan would be ready. Queen Lyra summoned Ethan early. She stood in her private chamber, her expression calm but firm. "Human," she said, "you have shown courage and wisdom beyond expectation. Tomorrow, Tarion may attempt another attack. We must be prepared, not just for the child's safety, but for the honor of the palace." Ethan bowed. "I am ready, Your Majesty. Lyra and I will face whatever comes." Lyra appeared then, standing silently. Her small hand slipped into Ethan's. "I'm not afraid if you are with me," she said simply. The Queen's eyes softened. "Your trust in each other is remarkable. That is what will save you." The morning passed with strategic preparation. Ethan guided Lyra through exercises designed to sharpen her instincts. He taught her to notice the faintest movements, to anticipate footsteps before they arrived, and to trust her gut feelings completely. The child absorbed each lesson, growing in confidence with every step. Meanwhile, palace guards prepared defenses, repositioning quietly at Ethan's guidance. He combined human tactics with Kalari precision, creating a layered plan. If Tarion struck, the palace would not be caught unprepared. By mid-afternoon, the tension became almost unbearable. Shadows lengthened in the corridors, and whispers among the courtiers hinted at anxiety. Ethan knew that Tarion was watching, calculating his approach. And soon the rogue noble would reveal his plan. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, a sudden alarm rang throughout the palace. A coordinated strike had begun. Figures emerged from hidden passages and the outer walls. Tarion's agents moved quickly, aiming directly for the heart of the palace where Lyra was. Ethan sprang into action. He guided Lyra through secret passages, using every trick he had memorized over the past days. The child's instincts were flawless, detecting each hidden threat before it could act. Together they navigated the palace like a single entity, moving silently and efficiently. At the central courtyard, Tarion himself appeared, furious that his previous plan had failed. "You dare to defy me again, human?" he shouted. Ethan did not flinch. "You underestimate our resolve. Lyra is not a prize. She is the future of this palace, and I will protect her." Tarion lunged, but Ethan anticipated the movement. Using quick thinking, he dodged and led Lyra behind a protective barrier. The palace guards, positioned at Ethan's strategic points, engaged the rogue agents. The courtyard erupted into controlled chaos as defenders used their superior training and Ethan's tactics to overwhelm the intruders. Lyra, despite her small size, played a crucial role. She pointed out hidden threats, signaled directions, and guided the guards toward unseen dangers. Ethan marveled at her instincts, realizing that the child's perception was as vital as any weapon. Together, they became a seamless team, human courage paired with extraordinary alien senses. Tarion, realizing his agents were being defeated, attempted a desperate escape. Ethan acted quickly. intercepting him at a narrow passage where the noble could not easily maneuver. "It is over, Tarion," Ethan said calmly. "Give up." The rogue noble hesitated, then lunged. Ethan sidestepped, using the environment to block his path. The guards captured Tarion swiftly, ending his threat once and for all. The palace was safe. Queen Lyris arrived shortly after, observing the scene. Her eyes held a mixture of pride and astonishment. "Ethan," she said softly, "you have done more than I could have imagined. You protected my child, my palace, and my people. You have proven that courage and trust can surpass any obstacle, even a rogue noble's scheming." Lyra ran into Ethan's arms, her small face beaming with relief and joy. "You saved me," she whispered. Ethan held her gently. "We saved each other," he replied. "You trusted me and I trusted you. That is how we won." The courtiers murmured in astonishment. A human, an outsider, had not only defended the royal child but had orchestrated the palace's protection with intelligence and bravery. Whispers of respect and admiration spread quickly. Many Solari, who had doubted humanity's strength, now recognized the potential in courage, trust, and quick thinking. The queen stepped forward, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Your deeds today will be remembered for generations. You are more than a protector. You are a symbol of hope and unity between our worlds. Lyra's safety is ensured thanks to you." Ethan bowed. "I only did what I could, Your Majesty, and I only acted with her trust guiding me." The palace slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but something had changed. Where there had been doubt and hierarchy, there was now respect, acknowledgement, and admiration. Humans, once considered fragile and limited, had shown their worth through courage, ingenuity, and the strength of trust. Later that evening, in the quiet of her chamber, Lyra sat with Ethan by the window. The stars reflected in the palace's crystalline walls, casting shimmering light across the room. "Do you think he will ever try again?" she asked. Ethan shook his head gently. "Tarion may plan, but he has learned something today. He learned that courage, trust, and preparation cannot be defeated by deceit alone, and we will always be ready." Lyra leaned lightly against him, comforted by his presence. "I feel safe with you," she said softly. "You are safe, Lyra," Ethan replied. "And you are brave, braver than most anyone I have ever met. Together nothing can harm us." The queen entered the chamber then, observing the scene. She smiled at the sight of the bond between human and child. "You have changed more than this palace today," she said to Ethan. "You have shown my daughter, my people, and even me that strength is not only measured in power, but in trust, courage, and the willingness to protect what matters most." Ethan nodded. "I only followed what seemed right." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with admiration. "You are my hero," she whispered. The queen's eyes softened. "And you are a hero to us all, Ethan. Your deeds today will be remembered, not as a human among Solari, but as a protector, a guide, and a friend." The palace celebrated the end of Tarion's threat. Guards, attendants, and courtiers offered thanks and respect to Ethan. Even those who had doubted him now recognized the extraordinary courage and intelligence he had displayed. Humanity, through one man, had earned the respect of an entire alien world. In the days that followed, Ethan continued to train with Lyra, preparing for any future threats. The bond between them grew stronger, a combination of trust, instinct, and mutual respect. Queen Lyris watched with pride, knowing that the palace and the child were safe not only because of walls or weapons, but because of the courage that a single human had brought into their world. Ethan's time in the palace would be remembered as a turning point. A moment when a human, once considered fragile and limited, had shown the power of courage, intelligence, and heart. The palace of Nirelith had witnessed an extraordinary partnership, an alliance between instinct, bravery, and unwavering trust. And as night fell over the palace once more, Ethan stood on the balcony beside Lyra, gazing at the stars. "The world may be vast and full of shadows," he said softly, "but with trust and courage no shadow can touch us." Lyra smiled, her small hand holding his. "I believe that," she said. The queen, watching from a distance, nodded quietly. The palace was safe. Her child was safe, and humanity had proven, in no uncertain terms, that even in an alien world, courage, trust, and the strength of heart could change everything. Ethan, a human among the Solari, had not only protected a child and a palace, he had inspired a world. And for the first time in her life, Lyra felt completely secure knowing that courage, trust, and friendship could conquer even the darkest threats. The palace lights shimmered across the gardens, the corridors and the walls reflecting a new dawn. Shadows would always exist, but so would bravery, and humanity's light had been proven stronger than any darkness.